Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Now off to Connecticut, where a federal appeals court has reinstated a challenge to Connecticut's policy of allowing transgender girls to compete in girls' high school sports 2 months after a 3-judge panel upheld the rules.
Yeah, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New York says the full court will rehear the appeal of 4 cisgender runners who say they were unfairly forced to race against transgender athletes in high school competition. Now, the court has become more conservative in recent years, with 5 of its 13 judges, excluding several senior judges, having been appointed by former President Donald Trump. A lawyer with the Conservative Alliance Defending Freedom, which represented the 4 Connecticut cisgender athletes, said the group was pleased by the court's decision. And we've gone back and forth about this before. I think my biggest concern, and I'm a stand on it, is biologically, are these athletes, these transgender athletes, biologically, not with what they identify with, but biologically, are they at an advantage over a female? If they're biologically male, is there more of an advantage, biologically speaking, over a female athlete? And if there is, that's where things get a little gray and dicey for me, because I don't know if that's fair.
Well, it's important to note that there's still a lot more research that needs to be done, but based upon the evidence that's out there right now, there's no evidence that suggests that they have a biological advantage, right? In fact, there was the judge thought the transgender athletes' ability to compete in sports is subject to a continuing national debate. We know that 18 states have passed laws banning transgender women or girls in sports based upon the premise that it gives them an unfair competitive advantage, but that is unfounded. That's unfounded, and there were a number of judges that said that the conservatives that were bringing this case really didn't have the standing because there wasn't enough evidence that suggested that that was true. There were a number of events that these 2 black girls, these 2 black trans girls participated in where they didn't win every race, right? And so if they have this sort of biological advantage,
but the
right,
question still remains,
then the scoreboard would look a whole lot different.
I don't know. For me, I just think I would need more evidence. I would need more the research to confirm that there would be no biological advantage, because just reading it on paper, it sounds like there could well be an advantage between a biological male who now identifies as a female versus a female who was born, biologically.
But
I understand the argument and the concern.
I just think it's important to point out that, when folks transition, right, it's not that they just suddenly decide that they are going to dress in the gender identity that they identify with, that there is a process that involves, hormone therapy and other forms of therapy, right? And so, I think there's an opportunity for people to lean in and learn a little bit more, about transitions, and especially among youth. And again, there is no evidence that suggests that they have a biological advantage.
I appreciate that. It is a learning curve, and I appreciate you wrapping it up as such, because for me, it's interesting. Gray area for me. All right.
Well, speaking of evidence shows that throughout the U.S., communities of color are more likely to be burdened by various industry infrastructure, disproportionately jeopardizing the health of Black and brown people. Experts say that Houston and the Pipeline Project are microcosms of the nation's persistent environmental racism that subjects people of color to hazards. According to a 2017 Clear Air Task Force and NAACP report on air pollution from oil and gas facilities, Black people are 75% more likely to live near industrial facilities in quote-unquote fence-line communities. In a study published last year in the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology, Casey and a team of researchers, they found formerly red line neighborhoods were twice as likely to be oil and gas well sites, showing how federal policies continue to fuel structural racism. When we talk about Houston, Texas, it's important to know that the study of environmental justice really started in places like Houston, Texas, right? Houston, Texas being one of the energy capitals of the country, one of the energy capitals of the world. And, we talk about the high asthma rates that Black folks have. We talk about other ailments that happen when we live close to pollution sites. Well, this is a part of how this happens. The rules of the road in terms of who's allowed to build these facilities and what voice the community has in pushing back. That is critically important. And in places like Houston, it's not happening enough.
I would agree with that one. Now, when it comes to making impulsive purchases, Black millennials and Gen Zs appear more susceptible to practicing that behavior than other consumers, like Xer here, Gen X. New data shows that nearly 70% of Black millennials and 2/3 of Black Gen Zs report they make impulsive or unplanned purchases based on a social media ad. Their spending is higher than 50% of all Americans. Now, social media marketing is big business, we know. But did you know that sources say advertisers were projected to spend more than $56 billion promoting their products on social networks in 2022? There's a Center for Economic Growth that estimates Black spending power will rise to $1.8 trillion by 2024. We've always had the power. We've always had the money. It's just never been respected. And I think as we continue to rise as a people and understanding how powerful our dollar is, maybe some of our strategies, if not all of our strategies on pushing back on some of these other issues will start economically. That's the shift that if you do a little research, Martin Luther King Jr. was making, which made people much more nervous because he was going to shift to more of an economic approach in addressing racism. But listen here, millennials, Gen Zs, the generation that wants it now, and they want the big house. They want the $200,000 car. It is just, I love how bold the generations are, but what I think they miss out on sometimes is there is a process. My generation, Gen X, my parents, baby boomers, we had to save up. There was a process, there were steps, there were levels. I think these generations want it now, which is why you probably see impulsive buying and increases and them being one of the biggest buyers out there.
When I saw the story, I thought about my last impulse purchase.
Which was?
I think it was a Savage by Fenty purchase. It was following Rihanna's performance at the Super Bowl. What was your last impulse purchase? Gets her every time. Every time. Now, moving on.
I'm not an impulse person, so I just,
Okay. Well, good for you. Yeah. Good for you. I'll call you next time I have an impulse.
Please do. I'll calm you down. You better save your money.
Yes. Well, moving along, a new report shows a worrisome increase of suicides in 2021 after 2 years of consecutive declines, with a sharp increase in the suicide rate of young Black people. According to the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, suicide among young Black folk aged 10 to 24 increased significantly by nearly 40% from 2018 to 2021. Now, there was a 5% overall increase of suicides among people ages 25 to 44, and Blacks accounted for nearly 25% of that increase. Can you believe that? In a separate CDC report released this week, researchers found that teen girls experience high levels of violence, sadness, and suicide risk in recent years. Black youth were less likely than other racial groups to report feeling sad and hopeless, but more likely to report suicide attempts than white, Asian, or Hispanic youth. Courtney, you know that this is an issue that's deeply personal. I lost my brother to suicide nearly 20 years ago. I can hardly believe it. It feels like yesterday so often. And you can't separate the vitriol that we've been reporting on day after day after day. You can't separate, the war against Black history and just sort of the ugly anti-Blackness that's out there, and feelings of hopelessness and despair and where that can possibly lead.
The only thing I can think of, and I think definitely there's some specifics to certain generations, the only thing I can think of between generation to generation is social media. I mean, I grew up in a time where there wasn't social media. You trusted and relied on what your mama said, your daddy, your grandmama, your teacher, your pastor. You may have gotten a Right On magazine to see what the latest celebrity gossip was, or listen to a radio show. But the way that we're going about living our lives now, these younger generations they're born into this technology. They're born into this way of living our lives on social media. And I don't know if it's too much exposure. It causes for too much of a short circuit when they can't handle it, they can't process it, the bullying, the this, the that. You're supposed to look this way, you're supposed to look that way, you're supposed to have this, dress this way. I did not deal with that I'll be 52 tomorrow. I did not deal with that. And so I think that's the only difference that I can pinpoint as to why these stats for these younger generations are off the chain. And even my generation is happening. I'm not saying, my generation is all together and because we had a certain kind of different upbringing, we're all together. That's not the case. But in regards to this story here, that's the only difference I see is social media.
Well, you may be onto something.
And technology.
The sort of surround sound effect and the inability to unplug. And so we'll continue to keep our eye on that story and more. But up next, a Virginia lawyer is looking for a $3 billion payout from the University of Richmond.
Well, okay. I'd love a $1 billion payout too. We'll tell you the reason behind the costly lawsuit when we return. You are watching Fox Soul's Black Report. Show me the money.